Good, perfect. Okay, so this is joint work with Sarath from MIT, Mengxiao from USC, and my colleague Alex Slivkins from Microsoft Research. I'm Brennan from MSR. Alex sends his apologies. He had a conflicting talk, so I'm sneaking in at the last second. This is about auto bidding. We've already heard a lot about auto bidding. I just want to bring sort of a couple things to our attention, make sure we're on the same page. All right, so we've got advertisers. They're participating in ad auctions. They're not bidding in those auctions directly. They're rather specifying high-level constraints to auto bidding algorithms that will bid on their behalf. In this talk, I'm going to be, it's not working. In this talk, I'm focusing specifically on when you're giving budget and ROI targets to the auto bidders. And I'm going to be focusing particularly on sort of this notion of like first-party auto bidders. So I want to think of these as being provided by the platform as a service to the advertisers. And so how do we design these things? What's the goal? Well, there's sort of two ways I can think about the goal, right? So there's sort of individual level constraints, right? I want these auto bidders to do a good job at the mandate that they're serving for the advertisers, right? Which I want to think of as they get sort of low regret for the problem of maximizing value subject to their constraints. Right. But on the other hand, they're competing against each other across the market. So I also care about sort of whole market performance. All right. Like I want them to sort of maximize, say, the efficiency of the outcome that occurs when they compete against each other. Right. And this work is about trying to like combine these two constraints, these two goals. Okay, so what do I mean by sort of whole market guarantees? Well, let's think about a sort of a simplified model. We do more in the paper, but come see the poster if you want this. In a simplified model, I've got one impression sold per round in a second price auction. Okay. And now the auto bidders are basically playing a pacing game against each other. I want to think of them as trying to learn a multiplier that I can think of as like a bid per click, right? That's going to be multiplied by a click rate on each impression that's sort of, possibly correlated across advertisers. And so this defines a game that the advertisers, the auto bidders are playing against each other. And there's been a lot of work trying to study that game. Like, what is this pacing game? Where is it going? What's the dynamics look like? We know, for example, that at any pure Nash equilibrium of that game, I'm going to get a market allocation that is good, quote unquote, by which I mean you get a true approximation to the optimal liquid welfare of any allocation. As a reminder, liquid welfare is a notion of market efficiency in this kind of game with spending constraints, right? And this is equivalent to compensated variation in economics. Okay, it's basically how much people would be willing to pay for the allocation that they got. Okay, so that's great, except finding a pure Nash equilibrium is hard computationally. And so if we're looking for sort of theoretical guarantees, we can't necessarily assume that auto bidders are going to find this equilibrium point, right? So what do we do instead? Here we're looking at bounding liquid welfare along the learning path instead of necessarily looking at the equilibrium point, right? So we're going to imagine maybe our auto bidder has some kind of dynamics that's chaotic or cyclic or doing I don't know what, but I just want that on average over that sequence of bidding behavior, I get good liquid welfare. And so what we do in this work is we come up with auto bidding algorithms that had that kind of guarantee, right? So we have expected liquid welfare that's at least half the optimum minus a sublinear term when you run for T rounds. This works under bandit feedback, right? So it only gets feedback on like the payment it made each round. And at the same time, it gets this sort of sublinear individual regret. And we think of the second thing as being like a price of admission, right? We want to make sure that advertisers actually want to use the auto bidding algorithm. They couldn't do better themselves, right? And subject to that constraint, I want to do good for the overall market. I just want to mention lastly that, this builds on prior work for our group that was looking at this specifically for budget constraints. We showed that sort of this gradient-based method of Balsaro-Agur gets a similar sort of guarantee to this if I only have budgets. So what we're really doing here is like building up to have budgets and these ROI targets. This requires a slightly new algorithm. We do something that's based on multidimensional gradient descent, but not in exactly the standard way. Thank you. Basically, it's multidimensional gradient descent with some counterintuitive and, dare I say, wacky twists. And if you'd like to know more about that and how we do it, please stop by the poster. Thank you very much.